Hey gang, Sarah Hill from Story Up VR. We've gathered here a bunch of individuals who are experts in 3D audio. I have questions about 3D audio. I know that you have questions about 3D audio as well. So we've assembled a panel of experts to share some of their expertise. Experts in capture of spatial audio, experts in mixing spatial audio together. So for the next 33 minutes, we're going to go on a deep dive into some of those different things. So let's start off with some introductions. First off, Austin, say hello and tell people where you're from, your title, and where you're joining us from today. Austin, how about Albert? Albert, say hello and tell people where you're joining from.
Hi, I'm joining from Weehawken, New Jersey, which is right across the river from the Big Apple. I'm an audio engineer here in the city. I've been doing music, post, television, and I just recently discovered the whole 360, ambisonics and all that, binaural. Although I had been using B-format microphones in the late 90s with the Callrec MK4, we never really knew what to do with it because we just didn't have enough channels. You know what I mean? Like we had tape, so every space was precious. And now I'm just learning fast, and I've created my own workflow that works well for me.
Great, and we're going to get into that workflow in just a moment. We just want to go through and make sure that everyone is introduced here so we know who we've got in the Hangout. And I should mention that, Albert, that you are from 360 Performances, and we're glad to have you in the Hangout today. Let's go back to Austin. Austin, quickly say hello and where you're from.
Sure, yeah, I'm Austin. I'm a sound designer. I live in North Carolina. My background's mainly in game sound design. And the past year or so, I've been learning to do VR stuff, so I'm learning just like everyone else and hope to gain some insight from this talk as well.
All right, and he is from Orb Soundworks as well. Dylan Cower, you are a software engineer with Jump. How you doing?
Hi there. Yeah, I work on spatial audio for Jump, which is a stereoscopic 360 camera made by Google, and I'm based out of the Seattle Google office.
Great, glad to have you here today. Eric, hi, how you doing? Introduce yourself and tell people where you're from.
Hey Sarah, it's Eric Fassbender from Atmospheres. I'm currently calling you from our caravan, our mobile home that we just purchased yesterday to go on a road trip to record 360 video together with spatial audio throughout Australia and probably Southeast Asia.
Excellent. Glad to have you here today with Atmospheres. Nicolas Whittaker of Google News Lab. Hi, Nick.
Hey, Sarah. Thanks for having me. I'm a media outreach manager on the News Lab at Google. I focus a lot on education, training, tutorials, lessons on our site, g.co/newslab, where you can find a lot more about Google's tools, as well as things like VR and 360, which is a big area of focus that I'm taking a lot of attention for these days.
Absolutely. If you're a journalist or a content creator, definitely want to know Nick and some of the neat things that they're doing there at Google News Lab. Hi, Ryan in Austin. You want to introduce yourself? Say hello.
Hey, my name's Ryan Thomas. I am with Subversive out of Austin, Texas. We're a cinematic VR content company, and we focus on 360 video, and lately I've been experimenting with the capture and processing of spatial audio.
Excellent. Glad to have you here today. And Varun. Hi, Varun from Two Big Ears. How you doing?
Good. Hi everyone. I'm one of the co-founders and I lead product development at 2 Big Ears. We develop spatial audio technology across the whole stack, from rendering tech all the way up to tools and technologies ranging from interactive game audio to real-time 360 capture, playback, and broadcast.
Excellent. So now that we've got all those introductions out of the way, let's go into the meat of our discussion, and that is about 3D audio. And it used to be back in the day, and I have a radio background, that we would splice together audio tape with a razor blade, right, and use physical tape to put it together. And now here we are inside the sphere with positional tracking, with head-related transfer function, and all of these things that we really need to know about. So let's start off first with what is 3D audio, and we're curating these questions from the stream. We are watching our Twitter, our Facebook, and our Google Plus as well, so if you have questions for this group, feel free to ask them in those forums or on Twitter as well. My Twitter handle is Sarah with an H mid-mo. We'd be happy to pose them to the group. So what is 3D audio? Who would like to take that?
I'll take it.
Go ahead, Albert.
Well, I mean, if you see stereo and mono as 1D, right? So you have left, right, that's 1D. With 3D, you're adding heights, top and bottom, and you're adding front to back. So that's the 3 dimensions of sound.
Okay. Anybody else want to add to that?
Sure. It's also quite a blanket term that's been used for the past 20 odd years. So it can range from playback of the kind of soundscapes that Albert described over speakers or headphones. So it's quite a blanket and loose term.
So the differences between 3D audio and, say, binaural audio. Let's just do that definition. What is binaural audio? Byron?
Sure. Yep. So binaural audio is essentially a mechanism, a method by which you can recreate how we as humans hear sounds using our 2 ears, hence binaural. Traditionally, this was done using microphones that would look like human ears, like the human head, or you'd set up microphones inside your ears and walk around, and you'd recreate those effects. Over the past 20 years, we've seen various methods to recreate this effect using software or hardware, where you try and recreate a model of the human head using various techniques. And what you essentially end up with is a software or hardware filter that recreates these effects. And so if you've got a sound playing above you, what makes you believe that the sound is above you is the shape of your head, your ears, and how the sound reacts in that environment, reflects across your body, and enters your ears. So binaural audio is a method through which 3D audio can be represented and played back over headphones.
Great. Dylan, you're shaking your head a lot. You use binaural audio a lot with Jump.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I think for VR, you're going to see binaural audio is the primary way of delivering sound to people, just because not everyone can build a multi-speaker system in their VR room, for example.
Okay. So spatial audio, is spatial audio 3D audio? Are those terms interchangeable? Yes or no?
Debatable, I'd say very much so. They're all, again, very loose terms that are used interchangeably. And it very much depends on the context in which these terms are used.
Okay.
Yeah, to me, I think like spatial audio could also be 5.1 or 7.1 or any of those, but it doesn't have the height component, right? So it has front and back, and it has left, right, and the sides, but it doesn't have above you or below you. So I think 3D adds that third dimension of top to bottom.
I think spatial audio is often used as sort of a synonym for surround sound audio. So they're sort of one and the same, but it depends on the context.
I think one of the great things about binaural in itself, and I may have missed something because I bumped out for a second, but is the fact that you can use any pair of headphones that you have. And that's one of the, in addition to it being just a great way to deliver spatial audio for VR, you can just use anything you got, plug it in. You don't need anything special, and that's one of my favorite things about processing it that way.
So if you're just joining us, you're watching a conversation with 3D audio creators, both in the capture and also in the mixing field as well, talking about 3D audio, and they're talking about spatial audio. Historically has been known as surround sound that has been a horizontal experience, and guys, jump in if I'm wrong here, and now we're talking about 3D audio, which is up and down, vertical, and all the way around the experience. Did I capture that correctly?
Yeah, there are surround sound systems that do have a elevation component, but they're generally limited to theaters, for example.
So let's talk a little bit now that we've defined 3D and binaural ambisonics. Who wants to talk about ambisonics?
I can talk about ambisonic.
Go for it.
I've actually got mine right here. I pulled it out to show, and we've been using the Core Sound Tetra Mike with some of our productions, and it's a wonderful little microphone, and it's very compact, goes really well underneath our 360 camera. And the thing that I love about it is it's one microphone, and it captures everything in all directions, and it leaves the processing and how you want to use the sound, leaves the decisions up to you in post. This particular one. This one has 4 capsules on it. I know there are some that have more, but the way that this one works is it basically just captures everything to 4 channels of audio in a recorder, and it allows us to process in post to quadraphonic, 5.1, 7.1, stereo, or obviously binaural.
Okay, hold on right there. Quadraphonic. Define that for us. What is quadraphonic? And I know the Gear VR is using that.
Somebody else might have a better technical definition for it, but the way I understand it is it's 4 sources of audio. So basically like 5.1 without the center and the sub.
Yeah, I think it's, from what I understand, it's like 4 binaural pairs. So you have sort of a binaural pair looking in each of the 4 cardinal directions. So you have binaural correctness in each of those directions, but aside from that, it sort of falls off.
Mm-hmm.
So
Eric?
not necessarily, Dylan. Yeah, not necessarily. It doesn't have to be a binaural pair. It can be just one microphone or 4 microphones that are in a cross. And they're recording in like a segment or just 1/4, one direction. And there's a difference between 5.1 and quadraphonic, where 5.1 has got 135 degree and minus 135 degrees at the back. So that's not directly 45 degree angle and then 45 degree angle at the back. It's slightly different, which is why I think that 5.1 is actually not really suited for virtual reality at all.
The quadraphonic is a lot better solution if you do have to go with something like that as far as like the Milk VR delivery. Do you agree, Eric?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
I was saying the quadraphonic, because of the angles like you were talking about, the quadraphonic is a better solution for delivery for something like Milk VR.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely agreed. Either quadraphonic or ambisonics or binaural with head tracking information. Either one of these is definitely the better solution. Yep.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, if I can jump in real quick, Quadraphonic was basically the oldest, spatial audio format. I mean, I think it's been around since like late '60s even. I mean, there's like Pink Floyd albums in Quadraphonic, but it is still a speaker-based, sound system. So it will never really work for headphones because the layout was meant for speakers. So the only thing that will work on headphones is ambisonics translated into binaural, because otherwise you will never get the rotation right. Otherwise you're just rotating those 4 sets of speakers around your head, but you're not capturing, the height and what's in between those speakers.
So let's talk a little bit about the mixing, and I want to make sure that we bring in Austin in here from Orb Soundworks as well. Are you doing a lot of positional mixes? And if so, what kind of challenges are you running into? And what do 360 VR content creators need to know about audio mixes after the fact, after they've already captured the audio?
Yeah, well, I'm kind of learning just like everyone else and getting into the field, being such a new area. I have found, though, that certain software solutions that are coming up make my job a lot easier. For instance, the 2 Big Ears solution kind of handles the whole thing from beginning to end, lets you iterate and test within the software you're working in that you normally work within as an audio professional. So there's not necessarily anything new in the workflow that comes to that. So that's been a really big leap forward, and has allowed us to basically use the same process we would for film or a game cinematic or something like that, and apply the same workflow, and it basically come out with a positional mix.
Okay, and if you're just watching, we're talking about 3D audio. We've defined 3D audio, ambisonics, binaural audio, and now let's get into head-related transfer function, HRTF. Who wants to talk about that and positionally tracked audio?
Right. So it follows on a bit on the description I gave for binaural audio. So I talked about the head being modeled in a way to recreate these effects that we hear in reality. So head-related transfer functions are nothing but a mathematical description of what that filter is like. So if a simple example is if there's a sound right by your right ear, you don't hear as much of that sound with your left ear, simply because your head tends to block that sound passing through. Simple physics. So head-related transfer functions are nothing but a measurement that will help you recreate these effects through software or hardware.
So anybody else want to add to that before we move on to the next topic? Nope. Go ahead, Albert or Eric.
To me, I found that it's a very personal thing because everybody's head shape is different. So the size of your ears, the shape of your head will really change how you hear, how well you localize sound. So there were I think there's now 2 databases of academic research that have a bunch of HRTF data sets that people basically can use in some of the plugins, in some of the ambisonic plugins. And to me, there's a big difference in selecting a certain HRTF as opposed to another one. I mean, it can really improve or what's the opposite of improve?
Reduce.
Reduce or what's the word? Improve and
Degrade.
And degrade, yeah.
Yeah, degrade. Dylan, you're shaking your head. Is that what you guys are using at Jump?
Yeah, we use binaural rendering using HRTFs as well because we ended up using ambisonics for our capture format. And also another point that I think is sometimes missed in a lot of literature is head tracking actually adds a ton to just using a static pair of HRTFs without head tracking compared to HRTFs with head tracking is a huge difference in terms of localization and just how well it sort of fits the user. You'll find using without head tracking, you often can't localize a lot of sounds using a wide range of HRTFs, whereas with head tracking you can generally localize using a much greater percentage of HRTFs.
Just to add on another point, in addition to head tracking, what also helps is our visual cues. So combining head tracking with good visual cues can make a huge difference and help get over a lot of the effects of unmatched HRTFs.
So let's talk a little bit about why sound is so important. And we know sound was important in fixed frame video, but even more so when it comes to spherical video, to virtual reality experiences. So Nick, talk a little bit about that, what you're finding with journalists and with other 360 content creators. What is it that makes sound such a crucial importance for immersion?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. A lot of the journalists that I talk to and a lot of the students just more broadly that I talk to, audio is almost always the last thing that they're thinking about. They're thinking about the shot, they're thinking about the location, the opportunity to get, that 360 camera in a location that no one's seen before, or an opportunity to put the viewer in an encounter that they would not have access to otherwise, but the audio element is often kind of an afterthought. And I think that what we're seeing, and I would say that everybody on the call would probably agree, is that there's this huge gulf between very high quality immersive experiences and a lot of the stuff that's being put out there these days. And I think audio is really a large piece of that. We're such so dependent on audio as well as visual to get an idea of the world around us, that when audio is substandard, or if it doesn't give you that feeling of immersion, you're immediately pulled out of that story, and then you start thinking about the fact that it is a 360 experience or a VR experience as opposed to you just being in that environment or being in that experience. So almost always whenever I'm talking with my journalists and with my students, it's, listen, no pun intended, let's take a look at audio first, make sure we're focusing on that and that you've solved for those issues, and then the video afterwards. In most cases, people will forgive bad video. They might not necessarily forgive bad audio. They'll skip to the next option.
Yeah, and just as for storytelling, obviously sound is incredibly important when it comes to ways to direct the viewer's attention. Just another tool that we have in our tool set in order to direct the viewer's attention. Hey, Nick, do you want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Hey, sorry, I'm a little late to the party. My name is Nick Pichnich. I'm a filmmaker and a tech guy. I'm founder of a new company called Revolver. I've been listening in from the beginning. I wanted to add one thing really quickly, if that's okay.
Go for it.
It's an expansion on what you just said, and it's a key thing for us with audio that But it's very, the whole idea of a lot of focus has been paid so far to documentary style filmmaking on 360 especially, and one of the reasons is the whole idea of, look, it's complicated. How do you move the camera? How do you cut? How do you direct people's attention in this environment? And documentary verite style is much more suited to this sort of filmmaking. But as we start to experiment more and more with how to direct a person's attention, how do you get them to traditionally in forms like theater, you would use light, you would use stage direction, you would use actors moving around. In this particular case, we find that sound is not only, spherical sound is not only a key part of the immersion, as you put it, but is one of the key tools you can use to give people certain cues, dramatic cues, and or how to move the story forwards.
So let's get down to brass tacks when it comes to spatial audio capture. A lot of individuals out there right now, 360 content creators, perhaps they have a Tascam or a Zoom mic, and they are still miking up interview subjects with a lavalier, and then they're putting that into their spherical experience. Is it so bad to capture it the old-fashioned way and then turn it over to folks like Austin over there, or Aurelia, who do spatial audio mixes, not spatial audio, but yeah, spatial audio mixes in order to make it suitable for VR? Have any of you all experimented with those different ways? And Aaron, you're shaking your head. Capturing it spatially and then doing a spatial mix, or capturing it the old-fashioned way with a Tascam or a Zoom and then turning it over to someone to do a spatial mix. Have you played with that? And if so, what has the outcome been? And I see Dylan and Aaron both shaking their heads. So Varen, we'll start with you.
Sure. So what we usually recommend our clients and our users is to capture as much information as possible on set. And this can vary depending on budgets available and technology available for that shoot. I personally don't think a single ambisonic microphone will solve all problems. Again, it depends on the kind of shoot. But if you're going after something like an interview, you want to have options for post-production and for editing. So I quite often recommend to combine an ambisonic microphone with a normal lav microphone, so that you've got options in post. Because quite often ambisonic microphones sound nice and spatial and capture a lot of the environment, which can be a bad thing, because in most cases locations tend to sound horrible. They look great, but they sound horrible, and you need to spend a lot of time in post actually fixing things. So having as many options as possible in post-production just makes it a lot more easier for the sound designer, who probably wasn't on set but has all this data that they can then just work with or replace those elements at any point.
Dylan?
Yeah, we found the same thing talking with content creators using spatial audio, where for sort of that documentary ambient, you're there sort of feeling, an ambisonic mic sometimes captures that, but as Varen said, most environments sound pretty terrible, so close miking and other techniques that are used traditionally for film end up working pretty well in VR as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and what's also possible right now is, I don't know if anybody of you guys have played with that, is Convolution Reverb, where you can basically you can use an ambisonic mic and use like a clapboard, a balloon, or a sine sweep, and actually get the room response. So then later on, when you're back in your studio, you can take your lav mic and mix it through that reverb and basically make it sound like you were there in that space. I think that's also a very good, development.
And what's that called again? What's that called again, Albert?
It's called Convolution Reverb.
Convolution Reverb. I'm going to have to Google that after the show.
Sorry, I just got to go 1 second. Sorry.
No worries. So we talked a little bit about spatial audio, about head-related transfer function, ambisonics, binaural audio, and a little bit about the workflow. Ryan, Thomas, before we move on to the next topic, is there anything else that you would like to add about spatial audio capture? You mentioned that you were using the Tetra mics?
Yeah, we're using the Core Sound Tetra mics and a Tascam audio recorder, and
you use those Tascams for interviews or for
so the one I have is actually in a rack bag, and it's a 4-channel unit, and it's nice because unlike the Zoom H6 and some of the other microphones, I find it's really important to have digitally controlled preamps rather than knobs, because with an ambisonic microphone, it's critical that you get the level on all four capsules the same. And with the knobs 1 through 10, if you get one of them a little bit off, it can throw your whole ambisonic sound field off. So this one has digitally controllable preamps, 1 through 100. You can set the levels of all 4 channels digitally so they're exactly the same. And I found that that's a really important thing when you're capturing ambisonics, is just to get everything at the same level. And aside from that, you know, we're using the same stuff we've used in ENG capture in the past. You know, we're using wireless lavalier microphones and high-quality shotgun microphones, and you know, like he said from Two Big Ears, I forget your name, I'm sorry. Yeah, so like he said, get as much data as possible, you know. And I love the Two Big Ears tools. I've talked with Abesh quite a bit and played around with some of the stuff that they're beta testing and some of the earlier versions, and I think what they're doing is great. And being able to take all that different data that you have as a sound engineer and really create things to sound the way you want them to sound in post, and be able to put the headset on and have the tools all there in a DAW, an audio workstation, is just phenomenal.
So what I'm hearing from you guys is that it's not one or the other. It's not just spatial audio capture, but it's also capturing audio the old-fashioned way, so that's good to know. Talk a little bit in these last few minutes about how you all are capturing their interviews. So, you know, for instance, we're finding really compelling sound when the individuals are interviewing themselves, but we mic up with a lavalier Tascam the old-fashioned way, connect it via a wireless to a small Sony recorder, and are out of the room, and we're able to monitor the audio. How are you all micing your interviews, and what's your workflow for that?
I can start. You know, we've used a couple of different options for, you know, for monitoring and setting up the interviews. You know, but we're using wireless lavalier microphones primarily, as far as in addition to the, you know, the ambisonics and such. And we're mostly tracking the ambisonic audio into one recorder at the base of the camera, and then we'll have another recorder where our wireless gear will be plugged into, and that's where we can go somewhere else into another room, or hide behind something, and we can have our recorder and our wireless stuff and change our levels and everything there. Whereas the ambisonic is more of a like get a level and leave it, and then that sits at the base, and it's easy to sync everything up, and you know, sometimes you have to flip the phase to get everything to sound right, but you know, capturing them separately hasn't been an issue for us.
Mm-hmm. Are you finding that those interviews, we find, are far more compelling than someone sitting there with a notebook staring at them answering questions? It's almost as if they're interviewing themselves,
Yes.
And you really are getting some candid responses. Like, you know, in some of the fixed frame stories we do, I don't think I'd ever do it that same way behind the camera again, because when you leave the room, you get so much more candid audio. Has that been your all's experience? Yes, quiet room there.
Sorry,
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, when you leave the room.
I can't comment on that, Sarah, because I don't do interviews. I just record ambient audio, you know, for nature sounds. So that's why I'm quiet.
Most of the interviews that I've done, like the interview style stuff, I have stayed in the room. But there is some stuff that we've done where, for more of narrative stuff, where we've hidden, but that has all been scripted stuff, so I can't comment on what you're saying exactly, but that does make a lot of sense.
Sounds good. Before we wrap up in the last couple minutes, I just would like for you all to share some of any projects that you would like to share that you're working on, and so anything that you would like to promote, any interesting use cases that you've seen out there for sound, we would love to hear about them. So Albert, let's start with you.
Well, I mean, I'm starting out with this, and I find it's actually a great. Immediately when I first found out about this whole format, 360 video and sound, I thought right away about music and music education. I thought, like, wow, how great would it be to have, you know, a bunch of musicians surrounding the camera and the microphone, and you know, you'll be able to turn your head and, you know, see them all around you. And also now there's a way to zoom in to the sound if you zoom in onto the picture, so you can actually pick up the different parts of the different instruments. So what I did, kind of crudely, because I obviously did not have any 360 footage of him, I remixed Bob Marley, Is This Love, in in ambisonics, basically where it zooms, but it's using a panoramic picture, so it doesn't look as great, but you'll get the point. What sound can do for that. And one more thing I'd like to add is that this is actually, it's much easier to mix on headphones than to mix on speakers and to have the whole sphere around you. Because before we're trying to cram it into 2 speakers, plus you're dealing with room responses and acoustics, and the low end you never get it right, and you're working on it. And now, I mean, you can have 50 hertz in your headphones, and it's it's not competing with anything. So I think for a lot of people, this will actually, they'll find out that it'll be easier to make it sound good than the old traditional stereo and mono and 5.1 formats.
Dylan, how about you? Any fast? I mean, you guys are working on lots of fascinating projects that jump. What do you got going on there?
I can't speak about anything that we're working on right now, but as far as my favorite spatial audio 360 video production that we've done, I think it's probably World Tour, which is the first one that we did, and that's by Jessica Breller, the principal filmmaker for Jump. And it's a really neat use of spatial audio because it's not one of those things, it's not like a classic spatial audio demo where, sound's coming out all around you. It just sort of, the goal is teleporting you so you feel like you're there, and I think it achieves that pretty well.
Great. We'll definitely look for that. Eric, how about you? You are in all kinds of atmospheres, literally and figuratively.
Well, Sarah, as I said earlier, we're currently on a road trip to record 360-degree video with spherical or spatial audio. And I'm about to receive an SPS 200 microphone, sound field microphone. And maybe a little bit later on in the year, I might actually get one of the Sennheiser VR microphones. So there's a vlog. I'm doing a video log with the Ricoh Theta, so you can actually get a feel for the places that we visit and some of the struggles, I would say, that go along with finding peaceful and quiet locations in our so populated world. So the vlog is in rather low quality with the Ricoh Theta because it's easy to use, but the high quality videos that I shoot with the 6 GoPro video, that is then later on available via our website. And yeah, I just sent through the URL for the vlog, so yeah, feel free to have a look at Australia.
John Hendicott of Aurelia just joined us. John, we missed you earlier, but hey, talk about, just real quickly as we wrap up here, what projects do you have going on that you're able to talk about, and any advice that you would like to give to 360 content creators very quickly about sound? What do they need to know about sound?
Firstly, I'm not John, I'm Chris.
Oh,
we've switched roles today. So,
I wasn't even looking. Okay, go ahead. Introduce yourself, Chris. You're from Aurelia.
Yeah, that's right. So we've been working with 3D sound for quite a few years, and more recently lots of VR projects. So yeah, we've got quite a few projects on the go. I don't know how many of them we can talk about, but yeah, VR projects and some installations as well. So what was the second part of your question?
Advice to 360 content creators, VR content creators about audio.
Just, I guess, my general advice is that, don't get too hung up with always recreating reality perfectly. In all of our experience, we'll capture sounds on location and then normally have to do quite a lot of dramatic embellishment to actually make a kind of nice storytelling experience. So yeah, don't be hung up with perfection of reality. I think just use it as a creative tool as far as possible.
Excellent. Nicolas Whittaker of Google News Labs. Lots of resources there.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Mainly what I'm working on right now is testing. So figuring out what gear is out there, what journalists can get their hands on, what's most realistic for fast turnaround but high quality. So what we're most interested in is hearing from other journalists. So if anybody has tips or tricks, or if anything's working really well for them, if they want to share content of a project that they've worked on, we can help amplify that message for them. You can reach out to me at support@newslab. So, I'm sorry. Actually, the easier one would be just reaching out to me at newslabsupport@google.com. But yeah, definitely interested in seeing what people are working on out there, and you can expect some more tutorials and trainings and other types of information coming out from the News Lab within the next few months.
All right, Nick B.
Hey, so The thing that I'm most interested in to do with spherical sound is actually a little bit complicated because, you see, I'm fascinated by editing, coverage specifically, how we will do this, how editing will evolve as a storytelling tool in VR, because it's a key part of cinematic language. So we've been doing a lot of experiments with that. The reason why audio is kind of key in that is in the same way that any one of us, like imagine it's 90% of these people, if not 100% that are experienced with editing, will know in traditional editing that we lead with sound very frequently to help bridge cuts. The equivalent in spherical audio, I believe, is going to be some aspect of leading with rotation. In other words, we're going to have to pre-rotate the audio a little bit prior to the cut. And I'm fascinated to see what will happen when we try to do that. So that's something that we're working on quite a bit.
Excellent. Aaron, what you got going on, and what parting advice would you give to 360 content creators, VR content creators?
Sure. So exciting stuff. There's lots of exciting stuff happening. Can't talk about a lot of it. We have the unique position of seeing what a lot of cool people do with our tools, and there's some really groundbreaking, exciting stuff coming out in the next 2 or 3 months. So watch out for that. General advice would be to just experiment and break the rules. We are all learning, and share your experiments, and we can all just learn from each other. I think there's more of that. If there's more of that that happens, it's going to be good for all of us.
Great.
And standards. Standards. That, I think that's going to be the big thing. I mean, at least for me, it is. We need some kind of standards of a delivery format that's going to be used by everybody, so we don't have to give, you know, quad or 5.1 to Gear VR and, you know, stereo to this manufacturer, binaural to the other one, the ambisonics. I think like that's going to be very important, because I thought about this a lot. I was like, wow, the video side basically has all their problems on the capture side, right? Everybody is still working with their GoPros all synced up and all this crazy stuff with the 3D printed rigs. But the delivery format is kind of easy. You just give them an MP4 file and it'll work, right, everywhere, and then you can rotate. We as audio guys, our capturing side is easy. We have the microphones, there's the plugins for mixing. But our delivery format, I think, is still to be determined. So hopefully that can be ambisonics, because I believe that's, you know, that's really the best solution. Ambisonics, you know, decoded into head track binaural. And I think that'll be, you know, very important to do it that way, because otherwise you're going to end up with like VHS and Betamax and all these different formats, and then, you know.
That's great. Well, at Story Up, we are working on a variety of experiences. We have one coming out from Zambia that we shot from the perspective of some individuals who have to crawl on the ground because they lack mobility. And we're also releasing an experience in a couple weeks about what it feels like to have a stroke. So audio is something that we are learning as well, and we so appreciate each and every one of you sharing your expertise with us. And Aurelia, I am so sorry that you came late here, but we definitely want to chat after we end this broadcast more about some of the different ways that you are doing audio. So 3D audio, ambisonics, head-related transfer function, binaural audio, spatial audio, all of those things are things that we cover today, and we hope that information was helpful to you. I'm Sarah Hill from Story Up VR, and we'll see you later. Have a great day.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yep.